senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, is joining us on the line, which he is. Oh, my gosh, look, he is in fact there. It's Greg Cosell from NFL Films, right on time here on a Friday. And, Greg, we hope you're doing well. And we're looking at this Monday night game. And I don't know. I know Steve's going to ask you about where you think the Bills rank overall in this league, seeing all the teams that you do on tape. I go into this game with just a wee bit of trepidation because I think the Niners might be the best team in the league in terms of navigating their way through a slew of injuries. Have you looked at IR for the Niners? It's like an all-star team, Greg.
I'm very familiar with the Niners.
It's like an all-star team on IR for them.
Yeah.
They're getting some guys back this week. So Ayuk, I believe, is back. I mean, no, they're getting some guys back. But this game's a fascinating game, Chris. So, hit me with what you want to hit me with, and we'll go into it. But there's a lot of fascinating elements to this.
Yeah, I'm nervous about the defense of the Niners being able to at least slow down what the Bills' passing game has been thus far this season. I think Verrett's had a fantastic season. Finally, he's been able to stay healthy, and he's become kind of the player that probably the Chargers envisioned him being when they made him a first-round pick all those years ago. Sherman's back off the injured list, so he's back in the fray. I'm wondering they play a good deal of zone, right? So
that's where it's funny you say that. This year, Robert Saleh has really kind of expanded his coverage concepts. Robert Saleh does have the Seattle background, a Houston background. He came to the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan, and he was a cover 3 guy. This year, you're seeing a ton more of man coverage. You're seeing a ton more split safety. This is not, the old days where you just said, you play the Niners, they play cover 3. They're doing a lot more defensively, and I think they will try to muddy the looks for Josh Allen quite a bit.
But man coverage is a recipe for disaster against this passing game. I mean, at least it has been for the teams that have played a good deal of that. Miami in week 2. And the Seattle Seahawks in Week 10.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't a good look for a lot of defense. They've been victimized. If you're going to play man, you better be ready to cover because these guys kill you in the passing game when you do that.
No, and that's true. The Bills have done very well. So we'll see what Robert Saleh decides to do. We don't know the answer to that. Again, I think they'll play man. The question is what's the percentages of the different coverages that they choose to play. They've got 2 really good linebackers, too, in their sub-nickel package. Fred Warner's arguably one of the top 3 or 4 linebackers in the league overall. He is a really good football player. And I think that they got rid of Quan Alexander because Dre Greenlaw, who was a later-round pick from Arkansas, has really shown very well. Starting as a rookie last year, he's shown very, very well, and he's a good football player, too. So they're really good when they're in their sub-nickel. And as we know, when you play the Bills, you're likely to play nickel quite a bit.
Yeah, and one of the things we've seen we've heard from the people in San Francisco we've spoken to, the Niners defense has struggled. Maybe it's because they do play man with running quarterbacks who get out of the pocket. That's where they've really been gashed this season.
Well, and they play a lot of them. That's the thing. So this will not be a new experience for them. They're in the same division with Kyler Murray. They played Russell Wilson for years. So, this is not a new thing for the 49ers. So that's why I said it comes down to percentages, how much they might play man. Maybe this is a game they don't play as much man. That's very, very possible. So we'll see. But I was just trying to make the point that they're not, sort of the 49ers from a few years ago where everybody just assumed, they play cover 3 and that's it.
How good you've seen, we talk to you every week, you see a lot of film on a lot of teams around the league, all the teams on the league. Where do the Bills rank? How high up on this hierarchy are they?
Well, I think their defense has gotten better, and I think that's an important point here. I think A.J. Klein has played exceptionally well filling in for Milano. And before we came on, I asked you if Milano would come back this week, because when you play the Niners, and again, it's whatever you choose to do. I don't know what Leslie and Sean will choose to do, but the Niners line up in base personnel an awful lot. They play Juszczyk over 40% of the snaps. He's their fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. They play a lot with 2 tight ends. So, most teams obviously play in their base personnel. We'll see what Leslie and Sean decide to do. If Milano is not back, I guess it's Smith, right? He's the third. The next guy up is the linebacker if they play base.
A.J. Klein played 100% of the snaps last week
Right, but he'd be the guy who plays with Edmonds anyway.
Right.
So they need
You're
a
talking
third
about the extra linebacker.
Oh, the
Yeah.
third linebacker.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It probably would be Smith. Yeah.
Yeah, who, by the way, he's the kid, if I'm not mistaken, and I hate when I can't remember exactly, but I think he's either the North Carolina or North Carolina State kid, right?
Yes, North Carolina.
Yeah, I thought he was a good college player. If I remember, he got hurt his last season. He got hurt one of the seasons, but I remember watching his tape, and I thought obviously he's not an explosive athlete. He's not a guy that, is going to be out there and nickel all the time and run around. But I thought he was a pretty solid box player. And against the Niners, you might need a solid box player because they're going to run the ball out of base personnel.
Right, and that's the only thing that concerns me. Like you play a team that plays, they play 21 personnel. I think it's the second most plays in the league. I think New England's the only
it's
team
almost
that's played more
35% of their snaps, Chris.
Yeah,
they play 21 personnel.
Yeah, I think only New England's run 21 more than they have this year, and that is not something they've seen a ton of. They played New England, but not something they see a ton of. How much of an adjustment do you find it is for teams that don't see a lot of that stuff, especially against an opponent they don't see all that often? What's the challenge there?
Well, to me, and again, I'm not a coach, so maybe a coach would explain it totally differently. To me, it simply becomes how you block, how an offense blocks where there's someone lined up in a different spot. Because the Niners, they run the same runs that everybody does. It's, obviously they've got some wrinkles, which we can get into in a sec. But, their base runs are zone. Everybody runs zone. It's just with use check. So maybe you're running zone with a fullback, a zone lead, as opposed to everybody on the line of scrimmage. So it's just how you block it, how you get to the base run. But we know they do an awful lot with Deebo Samuel, and you have to be very, very conscious of that because they use him on jet action. They'll use him on orbit reverses. He's really a critical piece to this offense. And by the way, Brandon Ayuk can do all those same things as well, and he's back this week.
Yeah, the interesting thing there, though, Greg, is I don't think there have been too many games where Coach Shanahan had both Ayuk and Samuel on the field at the same time.
Correct.
Seemingly all season long. One guy's been injured or the other guy. I don't know if you can predict this, but I'm curious how his play calling may or may not change, knowing he has both of those players at his disposal that he can deploy on the field at the same time.
I think, again, it's hard to be predictive about it, but I think at the end of the day, it just means you'll see different ways they get to the things we just spoke about. Because one thing about the Niners is when they do jet action, when they use Samuel as a runner, and now Ayuk who can do the same thing, those are not gimmick plays for them. Though that's really kind of part of what they do. So you have to prepare for that. They're really good at it, and the thing about Samuel and Ayuk, who we're watching now, Ayuk, is they're both really good run after catch. And that's the other thing. When you play the Niners, you've got to tackle because both these guys are really good run after catch.
And it does bring up the huge question that if the Niners are going to run with the fullback, they only carry on their active roster 4 linebackers. And it's Edmonds, Klein, Metakevich, and Andre Smith. That's the only guys listed on their active roster.
It's possible they get Tyrell Dodson back this week. It's possible.
If they go Milano and Dodson, that gives them enough bodies to muscle up against a fullback and go heavy. But that's not the defense they have run at just about any point this season, except in special packages. So if they're forced to go 60% of the plays, or half the plays even, in base personnel with 3 linebackers on the field, Niners are going to force them to win doing something they don't do very much.
Well, I just looked at stats, and that's why I looked down. People might have seen me look down. It wasn't as if I wasn't listening, but I have stats in front of me. They played the Bills in their sub-nickel on almost 90% of their snaps this year.
Right.
So that plays to the point you just made, Steve. I think they've only played in quote-unquote base, which would be 4-3, on something like 5% of their snaps. So in practice this week, I guarantee they've played in base unless they don't feel that they have to play. Again, that becomes a coaching philosophy and a coaching decision. Maybe they feel that they want to play big nickel. And is Marlowe, is he on IR?
No, Marlowe's available. So you have Marlowe and Saran Neal, who are
so you
players.
Could play, right, you could play big nickel, and you could, instead of a third linebacker, you could put Marlowe or Neal, as basically your third linebacker. Obviously, earlier in the year, they were playing a ton of big nickel, and then that gets obviously categorized as nickel and not base, even though essentially they were using Marlowe as a third linebacker.
Yeah.
You could easily see that.
Right.
And then just give me your assessment of Nick Mullins, because there are some – we were talking to Eric Davis, the former 49ers corner, who's now an analyst out there on the Niners, and he was saying basically, and being a former DB, I respect his opinion, he said, you look at Nick Mullins and you say, okay, basically their passing game is now in an 18-yard box. He says, in his opinion, Mullins cannot threaten a defense deep, and that allows defenses to play this Niners offense downhill. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. You know, I think Mullins is your classic backup. He might even be a number 3. He doesn't check a lot of the boxes that you'd like to check. He's smaller. He doesn't move particularly well, and he's got a limited arm strength. And their pass game by nature is very rhythmic and timing based, which is why he can have success, because Kyle is very, very good in terms of designing pass plays that can break down zone in particular. He's really good at identifying conflict defenders, players who have a run and pass responsibility. He identifies those players based on tape study, and he attacks them. But Mullins, if you just look at the physical traits, he is not going to drive the ball down the field. So I think Eric Davis' point is 100% right. Now, having said that, there are certain throws that people might think are deep throws, which are not arm strength throws. You can still throw a fade ball. I mean, if you're going to bring, let's say Levi Wallace up and press man, and you're going to run a fade and Ayuk runs by him, a fade ball is not an arm strength throw.
Why has the Bills' defense improved so much?
Boy, that's a great question. I think, believe it or not, A.J. Klein has played really, really good football. You know how I feel about Milano, but Klein's played at a really, really high level. I think that they've been better up front. And again, I don't have a great reason for that other than the fact that maybe, players are playing better. When you watch tape, the thing is, when you watch tape, which is always hard, you don't know how things are coached. And I don't know the small little tweaks that they might make. But I think they've gotten better play overall. They've become a little more aggressive, too. I mean, to me, again, without charting every play, guys, I think they've been a little more aggressive with blitz. I think they've been a little more aggressive with man coverage. That just, the eyeball test watching the tape, that's what I see.
And then just with respect to eye discipline for, the second-level defenders for the Bills this week. You mentioned all the jet motion that these guys run. Then you add the speed of Raheem Mostert to the corner. Like, you can't take a false step with Raheem Mostert, or he's up the sideline and headed to the end zone. So can you just maybe speak to the challenge that the Mostert speed and then the jet action presents with respect to the eye discipline that linebackers and second-level defenders have to have for the Bills this week?
That's a great, great point, Chris, because what they do a lot of is base run plays. They add these elements, jet motion, orbit mode, things that create problems for second-level defenders or set up block. Here, think of it this way. If you're a defensive end, okay, and all of a sudden there's jet motion and it's coming toward you, and you just might either pause or you might even take your initial step outside, and then all of a sudden you're in a tough position. You lose leverage on the blocker who's going to block you. They're really, really good at that. But your point about eye discipline is absolutely critical, because in this league, you take one false step, particularly in a zone run game, and then you really have a hard time. And if Mostert's able to outflank your defense, he's got great, great speed.
Do you see any probability that if Matt Milano comes back healthy, which we don't know if he is or not, they're very reticent to say whether he's in the lineup or out of the lineup. It's a day-to-day injury.
Yeah.
If he comes back, do you see a scenario that where Milano and Klein are both on the field with Edmonds at linebacker?
Yes. I mean, again, it all depends on Matt's health, but if he's totally cleared and ready to go and let's rock and roll, I don't know how they feel, but I would think that a pure 4-3 versus 21 or 22 personnel gives them their better group than if they go big nickel. But that would be my point of view based on tape study. That would all depend on Milano's health and how they ultimately feel that they want to match up.
Yeah, and that matchup, you're talking about the Niner run game with Juszczyk in the backfield, the rest of the fullback.
And by the way, the Niners throw the ball very well out of base personnel too. My point, that's the point I was making earlier about Kyle being so good identifying conflict players. Because let's say you're in a strong eye or a weak eye, Steve, and you know all this, and all of a sudden it looks like it's an ISO lead or a zone lead. You know that there's a linebacker that he's thinking run when he sees that action, but he also has a pass responsibility. Yeah, a coverage responsibility. And that's where Kyle is so good at identifying those guys and then working off of them in the pass game.
Last thing that I have on this game specifically, Greg. So the 49ers defense has allowed a completion percentage of 44% on deep passes. That's the 6th highest in the league. Now, that can be for a whole number of reasons based on game situations and what have you. No John Brown, who's still on IR.
Right.
Gabriel Davis has kind of taken on that role. He had a nice play down the left sideline on a free play on an offsides last week and goes up and makes a spectacular catch. Do you foresee that there could be opportunities in that regard based on what you've seen from this Niners defense, deep passing game specifically?
I mean, I would think you would take a shot or two. Look, Josh Allen's improved dramatically this year in so many areas. The deep ball, I still think, is something that needs work. Obviously, he gave Gabriel Davis an opportunity. It was a free play, but he gave him an opportunity to go up and get it, and Davis is 6'2", so he's a big wide receiver. Yeah, I think you have to take your shots. I've always been a believer in that. I learned that from Ron Jaworski, the old Sid Gilman approach that you've got to take your shots. How much, that I can't answer. But without question, now, what the 49ers are doing now that Sherman is back, he plays left corner. Jason Verrett, who you mentioned, Chris, he's had a phenomenal year. I think he's played really well. He's the right corner. And Mosley now is the slot corner because Taylor got hurt last week, so I don't know what his status is, but Mosley came in and played for him.
Yeah, Taylor went on IR this week, actually.
Yeah. All right, there you go. So I didn't see that, but so Mosley will be the slot corner because I believe Kwan Williams is not available either.
Yeah.
Greg, thanks. It's great talking to you.
Appreciate it, guys. I always enjoy it. Thank you.